Hey, everyone. Support our show by supporting our sponsors, MyPillow.com. It's a great American company and a great American sponsor. Go to MyPillow.com and don't forget to use the promo code Carter. Jen Psaki are apparently going to be our new White House press secretary. Got herself into quite a bit of trouble. And it's funny. I actually called her Jen Penske, and everybody here, I'm just a full disclosure, but I know her name. Every time I look at it, I want to say it just like Joe Biden. And he knows her, right? And he knows her. So she got herself into quite a bit of trouble. We're going to be talking about that. We are going to be talking about her hammer and sickle. We're going to be talking about people inside the Biden administration that are definitely anti-Israel. How is that going to affect us in the future? What is our foreign policy going to be over there? And I've got a special guest here. It's Daniel Hoffman. Yes. Former CIA clandestine officer. Ooh, very exciting. And he is an expert on the Middle East, South Asia, and guess what? Russia. He's going to fill us in on everything. I'm even going to ask him about the recent assassination of Iran's top nuclear scientist. And also a very important subject. Before I move any further, I want to talk to you a little bit about AMAC. I know I've talked to you about it before. I absolutely love AMAC. I believe in this organization. Would you pay hard-earned money to organization that fought tooth and nail for a government-run healthcare system? No way. You wouldn't do that. So why join AARP? Join AMAC, the conservative alternative instead. AMAC offers an alternative to just about everything AARP offers, but without the liberal agenda. Wouldn't you rather belong to an organization that actually fights for your values? Would you rather belong to an organization that protects our borders and stands up for you as an individual and your God-given freedoms? I stand with AMAC. I hope you will too. Join today at amac.us/Carter. Again, that's amac.us/Carter. AMAC cares about your freedom. You should too. I want to start with what's happening in our country because we talked about AMAC, we talk about our values, we talk about freedom, but right now in the United States of America, we are facing a very, very dangerous time. It is a time where the threat of COVID, and understandably, people are worried, people were concerned, especially when we didn't know much about it. Early on, remember at the very beginning of the year, I can't believe this year is almost over. Everyone says it's the worst year ever. I'm tending to agree with them. But at the very beginning of the year, when we didn't know anything about COVID, we were all really scared. I mean, so many people were like, what is this virus that's coming from China? People are going to die. We saw those videos from China, some of which I believe were actual propaganda. Yeah. Guess that. Chinese Communist Party and their propaganda. But remember that people were dropping dead on the streets and people were walking over their bodies and Chinese were, military officials were grabbing people and putting them into cars. So, okay, past all that, we now know the facts about COVID-19. We understand COVID-19 a lot better. We've got, I think, roughly 4 vaccinations out there that have been approved or will be approved or on their way to approval. At least we know that they've passed the trial phase. Some of them more than 98%, others like Moderna, 94% effective against this virus. But in the United States of America, people are like losing their businesses. They're being shuttered. From California to New York, restaurants aren't being allowed to open. Small businesses are limited to a certain number of people. Some businesses haven't even opened at all this year. Some people have lost their entire livelihoods. How is that possible? How can it be that we live in one of the freest nations on earth and that friends of mine, people that I know, are going to lose their businesses? I'm a small business. I know you're listening to me out there. You're small business owners. How can this happen? How have we let this happen? How have governors like Governor Gavin Newsom and others implemented laws that are so stringent, so unbelievably stringent, that it appears like we're living in like the old Soviet Republic? Or how can people like Governor Brown say, turn in your neighbor? I want to play a clip for you this is Dave Morris. He is a business owner in Portage, Michigan, and he is irate. This is from WWMT CBS 3 in West Michigan. Thank you so much for this clip.
The details on why the judge said no.
Here on this cafe.
Tavarius, is everything okay?
Okay. Our government leaders have abandoned me.
Are you the owner?
$4 trillion of stimulus money. They gave it to who? Special interest groups and campaign donors. I'm Dave Morris. I own the place.
So what's going on?
What's going on? You know what's going on.
Tell me. You tell me.
Hey, we got a government that has taken the stimulus money. They gave it to special campaign donors. They gave it to special interests. They abandoned me, and they have put me in a position where I have to fight back. Okay?
So do you feel that this is the right thing to do?
Absolutely. I feel everybody needs to stand up. Hey, listen, there was enough money to give every family in this country $20,000 to go home for 2 months. They chose to give it to special interests and campaign donors, the Kennedy Space Center, and they abandoned us. So you could have given me money. I'd gladly walk away for 60 days and let this virus settle down. I'm not going to do it alone. Okay?
Are you going to continue to violate the state's orders and stay open?
State order. This isn't an order. This is a conspiracy. This is a tyranny.
What do you want to tell other restaurant owners who...
Wake up. Stand up. This is America. Be free.
Right. Wake up. Stand up. This is America. Be free. Think about what this man is going through, because he's not the only one. I'm sure there are people all across this nation that feel the same way. You're so frustrated. I feel the same way. There are times where I've gone to a business and I've talked to business owners and they're just about in tears. Are we going to open up? Am I ever going to have my business back? What am I going to do to feed my family? Do you think any of these people in Washington, D.C. really give a hoot about you and your family? Do you really think so? You're paying their salaries, by the way. It's you. You're their boss. They don't care. That's why I'm wondering what is going to happen under this Biden-Harris administration. I mean, Biden's a big lockdown guy. He's like all these other Democrats. We saw the 2 bar owners. Look at what happened here on the East Coast, arrested for opening up their bar. What in the world is going on here? Americans are angry, frustrated. People all over the world are looking at our nation and probably going, what? Land of the free, home of the brave? What is going on? What upside down America are we looking at? I feel for you because I'm right there with you. I am in the same boat. I am angry. I am frustrated. I wonder sometimes I'm a small business. I'm a contributor for Fox News. I have my website. I have a podcast, rely on ads, ad sales, things like that, because people have to have money to purchase products, right? We all have to have money to go out. Now, Christmas is around the corner. It's very, very frustrating. And then when you think about some of the people in Biden's administration, I'm just going to segue right now to Karine Jean-Pierre. This is the deputy press secretary to Jen Psaki. I mean, I have a lot of concerns about Jean-Pierre's appointment. She's definitely an anti-Israel activist. Go on my website, SaraCarter.com. You can read a story there. Annalise Levy just posted that story this week. And you could read about her past. She's been a very vocal critic of Israel. She's worked as a senior advisor and a national spokesperson for, guess what? For MoveOn.org. Folks, this isn't a joke. It's a different country. We are a different nation altogether. I, like everyone else, want us to heal, want us to find a way to move forward, because we are all Americans. This is a great republic, and we should do everything we can to protect it. But what type of people are we dealing with here? I mean, I seriously, when I look at this and I think to myself, we've got this woman here. She's working, for MoveOn.org. She's definitely has an agenda, and she is going to be the deputy press secretary under Jen Psaki. And Jen Psaki has a lot of issues. I mean, right now, people are saying that the story was taken out of context, but that's so funny because the media is always making excuses for Joe Biden and for all of his picks for the White House. They would never do this for President Trump. I'm telling you, you guys know that. You've seen what's happened over the last 4 years. Well, in one particular photo, Jen Psaki is actually wearing the hammer and sickle hat, a Soviet hat. And she says, look, I was just wearing it for fun. It was a gift on a trip. But look, she gets a completely different set of treatment than anybody in the Trump administration would get. Oh my gosh, God forbid that Don Jr. or Eric or Ivanka put on that same hat, even as a joke, and show up in a picture. Because for 4 years, they tried to get the American public to believe the extraordinary lies that President Trump was some kind of Manchurian candidate for the Russian government, for Vladimir Putin. I'm not going to harp on that. I just wanted to put it out there so that you can see for yourself what's happening and how we're going to have to deal with this. I don't know look, I'm not going to judge them beforehand, but I'm just putting out the warning right now. These are the people that will be in the Biden-Harris White House. Jean-Pierre, she wrote an article in Newsweek about why she thought the Democratic candidates made the right call when they didn't attend the AIPAC conference. She said, because when it comes down to it, AIPAC's policies are not progressive policies, not progressive enough. AIPAC's values are not progressive values. She even accused them of being racist because that's what she thinks of the state of Israel. I just want you to think about that. That's what we're going to be dealing with. As I said, I'm going to have Daniel Hoffman coming up momentarily. I'm going to talk to him a little bit about the future in Afghanistan. I want to discuss with him, of course, the assassination of Iran's top nuclear scientist, what his thoughts are on that. And he wrote this phenomenal piece. It's an opinion editorial piece about who should be picked to lead Biden's CIA under his administration. And I'm going to get his thoughts on that. That would be Mike Morrell. He is talking about that. And he said Mike Morrell deserves to be the top of Biden's CIA. He was the CIA's Middle East Division chief, Mike Morrell. And he's a controversial guy. So I want to hear both sides from Daniel. But he is definitely somebody who's highly qualified and has given his life, in service of his country. We'll get to Daniel Hoffman in just a minute, but before I get to Daniel, I want to talk to you about heat holders. I love this product. It's such a great product. It's not like anything you have to put in your hands and your pockets to keep yourself warm. The material that this company utilizes actually keeps you warm. I mean, completely warm, even in the coldest of conditions. Look, the weather's getting cold, and the best way to keep yourself warm can be summed up in just 2 words. Like I've told you, heat holders. Plus, they make extraordinary gifts for your family. They have heat holders for your kids. That's socks, gloves, hats, scarves, and blankets. I mean, almost anything you can think of. You will not regret it. Go to heatholders.com and enter the code Carter. Get this. If you enter the code Carter, you get at least 15% off your order. Plus, you get free shipping with any purchase of $25 or more. Just go to heatholders.com, use the promo code Carter. You will not regret it. Without any further delay, I'm going to bring in my good friend and somebody who I have traveled around the world with, Daniel Hoffman. Thank you so much, Daniel, for being a part of the Sara Carter Show.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you for putting up with all my ads. But I am a small business owner. And that's what we do. We have to, we have to make money and we have to stay alive. And I love these products that I'm selling. So thank you for putting up with some of my commercials. And I just want to jump right into I think one of the most important stories was the actual assassination of Iran's top nuclear scientist. And, your history in the CIA, your long career in service of this nation, you really have a great understanding of South Asia, as well as Iran, as well as the Middle East. And I want to get your take on that. And the response actually from some people in the Obama administration, like John Brennan, your former boss, to that situation.
That was an extraordinarily impressive targeting operation. And of course, we can judge with a high level of confidence that Israel was behind it. The fact that they were able to get into Iran and mount this sort of an operation against Fakhrizadeh, who was the leader of Iran's nuclear program, is again demonstrates their intelligence. It's all about human sources who can get you that close, and then actually pulling off that sort of an operation. I frankly tip my hat to them.
Well, Fakhrizadeh actually was a name that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had said in 2018. Don't forget this man's name. He wasn't just a scientist. He was a scientist working on Iran's nuclear armament program. It wasn't just for medicinal purposes, according to the Israelis.
Right. He's been in charge of the covert nuclear program. He's been compared to Robert Oppenheimer, leader of the Manhattan Project. So that guy for Iran. So he's a high value target. And when you think about that one and the fact that, again, reportedly, Israel was able to take out al-Qaeda's number 2, Abu Muhammad al-Masri, earlier last month. And then the attack on Natanz in the summer, Iran's nuclear plant. I mean, this really demonstrates that Israel can get right at Iran's nuclear program. And, there's just a couple of ways to deal with Iran's nuclear program, and not to mention their ballistic missiles and their state-sponsored terrorism. I suppose you can think about diplomacy if you believe that's an option with this sort of a regime. The other way is kinetic strikes against individuals, high-value targets like Fakhrizadeh, and let's include Qasem Soleimani, whom we took out in a drone strike almost a year ago. And then, of course, you can target their infrastructure. The nuclear power plants, ballistic missile facilities themselves.
Right. Do you think, though, that this really quickly, Daniel, because every time I get you, I have so many questions.
Yeah.
Right now, with the government transitioning, the United States moving into a transition for Biden-Harris administration, Israel, obviously, I've spoken to sources very concerned about future relationship between the United States and Israel under this administration, which is drastically different than the Trump administration, particularly in its dealings with Israel. Do you think that this operation by the Israelis was kind of like a warning shot across the bow to Iran and to the rest of the world? We are in deep. We are sending a message, and it doesn't matter who's in charge of the United States. We're not going to allow anybody to cross these lines.
Yeah, so first it was a message to Iran that Iran is an existential threat to Israel, which means Israel will go into Iran and conduct these sorts of operations. The second message, you're right, it's to the United States. They're not going to outsource. The Israelis won't outsource their national security to us. They don't trust us. At least they didn't like the JCPOA very much. And lots of Democrats, Chuck Schumer didn't. If you're looking for the most eloquent response to why the JCPOA nuclear deal was a bad deal, look no further than Democrat Chuck Schumer, who spoke out eloquently against it. And so Israel is concerned that President-elect Biden wants to get back in that deal and eliminate the sanctions if Iran resumes compliance. That's not good enough. And so Israel is going to continue to mount these operations, and Iran themselves may decide, why should we go back into a deal when Israel is continuing to strike us? This deal isn't giving us any kind of deterrence or any kind of defense against attacks on our nuclear program. So Israel, rightly so, they're right there in Iran's backyard, is exercising command and control over their own national security. Hats off to them.
But if we go back into the Iran deal, let's talk about that. Israel is exercising command and control over their own national security. How can it be beneficial for us to jump back into the Iran deal when it appears to be that the best method, and I'll go into that a little bit with you. We talk about what happens in South Asia and Iran's actions as the world's largest state sponsor of terror, and what they have done on a global scale to target both Americans and Israelis and others. Throughout our history, when we've dealt with these ayatollahs and this cult-like regime, how does it benefit the United States for us to jump right back into that?
Well, first of all, there's no way that the Biden administration would gain enough bipartisan support to make the deal a treaty, a binding treaty. And I think that if President-elect Biden is serious about building consensus between Democrats and Republicans, this is the last thing he should be doing. And let's keep in mind, Iran has allowed al-Qaeda, not just regular al-Qaeda guys, but al-Qaeda senior leadership to homestead on their territory. They've mounted countless lethal attacks against us and our allies in the region and beyond. They've got a ballistic missile program. And as you said, state sponsor of terrorism with lethal proxy militants, Lebanese Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, lots of proxy militants in Iraq who are targeting Iraq's sovereignty and our people as well. So, this is the concern about that deal with bad deal. There's sunset clauses. I mean, the Biden administration, I think, would do well first to get those intelligence briefings, first to get their team in, and think very carefully about what sort of policy they want for Iran. Iran hasn't won a lot of wars, but they've won a lot of negotiations. They kind of won the 2015 JCPOA negotiation against us. Didn't help us that Russia and China were there operating against us as part of that discussion.
And Russia and China are still there. Are still there. I mean, I'm talking to sources in Pakistan, maybe not as much as I used to, but what I'm hearing is that they're seeing a lot of heavy influence of Russia in South Asia. We're seeing a lot of influence of the Chinese in South Asia. And I feel like, because we still have troops there, right? Not a lot, not a significant number, but we still have troops there. We still have intelligence officials operating in the region. I mean, we still have a serious national security implications there. And I'm wondering, how is it going to change under a Biden administration? Because Trump wanted to withdraw the troops. He was like, I'm done with the longest war. I want to get him out of there. Obviously, he didn't do that. It's a small footprint we have there. But I feel like I'm hearing stories of mission creep. I love using that word, mission creep, over in, South Asia. Like maybe something's going to happen. Even though I see stories that the Taliban is negotiating a peace deal, I'm wondering, like, how long is that going to last? I don't believe it for 1 minute, not for a New York minute. And I think, based on my experience in that region, and I know you're very familiar with it, that we could see ourselves dragged back into some type of, escalation in that area of the world.
Yeah, I don't expect any major, U.S. deployment there, made a large footprint. I will say I respectfully don't agree with the president. It's not an endless war. It is a forward deployment in a dangerous place, in a failed state. And we know from 9/11 that if we're not there, out on the front lines, as Charles Krauthammer used to say, if we're not over there detecting and preempting threats, they'll be visited on our shores over here. And that's the last thing we want. I served 3 years in war zones, unaccompanied, without my family, with a lot of other volunteers who were happy to be there, and U.S. military as well, diplomats. We were all honored patriots, to be out there on the front lines doing our work to keep the nation safe. But make no mistake, we can't wish away see the world the way we'd like to see it. I'm sorry that Pakistan, Afghanistan is a failed state. There's Al-Qaeda there. There's ISIS there. The Taliban is made up of the Haqqani network, which has enabled the Al-Qaeda to homestead on their territory and conducted lots of ruthless suicide attacks against us and the government of Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. I'm not arguing for 100,000 troops in nation building, but what I do believe is we need the smallest force necessary to conduct those missions that are essential for our national security, that you can argue are worthwhile putting our people in harm's way to keep our people safe. And I'm sorry the world is so small and interconnected, but that's the way it is. If we're not there, if we're not in Somalia, if we're not in the Middle East, then we're going to get hit back home. And that's not what we want. We want to work with our partners around them, through them. But at the same time, we can't simply outsource all of our security to the foreigners we can't fully trust, as you mentioned.
Absolutely. We saw that in Benghazi. We've seen it all over the world. It's very difficult. We need to have logistical support, though, for those small contingents in those regions of the world. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. As long as there is a plan, as long as they understand what their mission is. I think when we talk about this and, just so all of you out there understand what Daniel and I are talking about, I was out there when they were nation building. And I think there was a lot of frustration that, hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars and young soldiers' lives, were out on the front lines, building schools that got blown up the next day or building a hospital that was falling apart. I remember seeing that with my own eyes. Or, watching a road that we just built, through Korangal Valley or somewhere, just being decimated, and Khyber Pass being decimated by IEDs. So there's a lot of concern, I think, for people, and it's a reasonable concern that we don't want to enter into another nation building war again. But as Daniel said, he is 100% right. Anyone who's been there can tell you, I've been there. Al-Qaeda is there. ISIS is there. There is no doubt that they would use it as a safe haven to build and train their forces to attack us here in the United States. So you're saying small contingents, strike force teams in those areas that can take out these bad guys, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's about human intelligence. So running sources in those networks right. So that you can know what they're plotting and playing against you, so you can map out the network and know where the bad guys are and eliminate them before they target us here. And again, that's what we're trained to do. I think that sometimes we're blissfully unaware of all of that here in our country because we don't see it. We're not being attacked. And that's the greatest thing in the world. When I was serving overseas in South Asia, I came home and talked about a guy named Adnan Shukri Juma who'd been killed in December of 2015. Nobody knew who he was, senior Al-Qaeda guy. But back here in the United States, nobody knew who this guy was. And when I went back to our station overseas, I told that story. I said, that's the greatest compliment we could ever receive, that people in our country aren't tracking on this. They're going to school every day or their office or whatever they're doing, and they're not worried about it because they know we got it. And when the conversation on countering terrorism becomes so dominant that we don't talk about other things that really matter to us, then we're not succeeding at CIA, U.S. military, State Department, and other places. But I feel like we have. And kudos to the Trump administration for schwacking a whole lot of bad guys. I could sit here for the next hour and give you a long list. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, Qasem al-Rimi, the head of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, his bomb maker, Asiri. The list is long and extraordinarily impressive. And American people should be thankful for all of those outstanding missions that keep us safe.
Right. And thankful not only to the administration that was able to do that, but also to the people who put their lives, like you did, on the front lines, in their job to track these guys down, these bad guys, and take them out. I mean, we've lost a lot of really good people. And like you said many times, and this is for every one of you out there, we don't hear their stories. We don't know their stories. These are clandestine operations or operations that occur outside of the normal news cycle, and people lose their lives and children lose their fathers and mothers and their, and it just, it's unfortunately, that's the way of the silent, I guess, warrior, right? The silent hero. But they are, like Daniel said, out there protecting us. I want to jump to your column. It's in The Hill, and you're talking about the future of the CIA. So we're looking here now at the future of the CIA under a Biden-Harris administration. And you're talking about Mike Morrell. And Mike Morrell formerly headed the CIA's Middle East division. And with it, this is insider stuff, but within all the insider baseball, there's people that love Mike Morrell. There's people that don't love Mike Morrell. Talk a little bit about Mike Morrell and why you think Mike Morrell should lead the CIA.
Well, when I was actually chief of the Middle East division, and Michael was our acting director. First, he was deputy director, then acting director. I had just returned home from overseas in 2010, and that's when I really got to know him. And what impressed me about him from the very beginning was his intellectual honesty, his integrity. He was committed to getting as close as possible to the truth. We would have these standing room only meetings in his office and debate whatever the issue of the day was. Iran, for example, half an hour, and he'd be going through all of the intelligence and debating with everyone in a very respectful way, but real great debate, challenging his own assumptions in a very humble way. And he'd always, at the end, I always used to tease him, it'd always be three things. I said, must have been your Jesuit education. I don't know what it was, but he'd look at us and go, okay, guys, three things. He'd go downtown, tell the president the three things that mattered. And a lot of times it wasn't what President Obama wanted to hear, but it sure was what he needed to know. And there were times when Michael would say to the president, this is what my team believes, but I want you to know that my director of counterterrorism believes this, something slightly different. But Mr. President, you need to know that as well. So he was really committed to accurate, precise analysis. And I respected that about him deeply. I traveled with him a lot overseas to our dangerous places because I was responsible for the Middle East and South Asia. So we were in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Yemen, Libya, all the great garden spots that make my mom happy, knowing after I was there that I had been there. And he was always so eloquent with not just our officers, but our U.S. military, State Department, FBI, and other colleagues about the sacrifices that their families were making and that they were making. He understands the business of intelligence. I can't imagine a smarter, more able practitioner in the art of intelligence than Michael. Now, again, I'm biased. I served with him, and I think very highly of him as a person. And I would be overjoyed if the vice president chose him. We'll see whether President-elect Biden makes that choice or not. He's got apparently a range of people he's considering. But I felt strongly enough again to write that op-ed. And look, I don't claim to have all the answers about anything. I think it's certainly open to debate. I'm sure the listeners out there have their own ideas, and certainly I respect those too.
Right. Well, this is the thing. I agree that, I mean, you're the first person I would go to and say, I'm telling you guys, Daniel Hoffman is such a great, upstanding human being and somebody who I have so much respect for. So I really take seriously when he makes a recommendation like this. I believe that. I do not know Mike Morell personally. I have heard wonderful things about Mike. I've heard other things, but then again, this is the nature of the business, right? Everybody's out for something. One of the things I wanted to ask you, though, was what bit of advice would you give Mike Morell if he takes the position as the CIA director? Because this is the thing with John Brennan. And in the beginning, I actually I worked for a long time as a reporter under the entire Obama presidency. I was covering the war in Afghanistan and Iraq and Pakistan. And I had a lot of respect, for Brennan and for others, what I knew of them at the time and when I was working in the field and, mostly covering the ground up. But Brennan became very political. That was something that I never saw before, really, with the CIA. Became very politicized. I saw that with him. I saw it with General Hayden. I've seen it with others. So I'm not just trying to blame Democrats here. General Hayden was, Republican under a Republican administration. What would be the bit of advice that you would give Mike Morell?
So let me say this, because you raised it. I served in our headquarters under the leadership of Leon Panetta, who was a fantastic director.
Right.
And then David Petraeus, who was also an outstanding director. Mm-hmm. Michael Morell was our acting director, and then John Brennan. Brennan was, you could debate this too, but for me, one of the most politicized as a director. I'm not even talking about what he did afterwards in retirement, including his latest tweet storm when he got into a food fight with Senator Ted Cruz, which is so demeaning to our politics when you've got the former director of CIA and a sitting senator arguing about it. It's just, they should stop that. Have a private conversation on the phone. Turn your, rhetorical fire towards Iran or Russia or somebody else away from each other. But John started that, and he shouldn't have, and he made statements that he shouldn't have made about the attack on Fakhrizadeh. Who was, by the way, a general in the IRGC, which is sanctioned and is a terrorist organization, right, according to the United States. So there's nothing illegal about whatever was done by whatever state against him. Let me just make that clear. Brennan was wrong about that. Michael Morell, I had no idea what Michael's politics were at all when we were serving together, nor he of mine. Never came up. I mean, he was doing his job to get the president what the president needed to know, and that's where it stopped. Brennan was took a completely different approach. As far as what Michael needs to be thinking about, he's been thinking about this for years, frankly. I think the big challenge is going to be bringing 21st century technology, to what the intelligence community and CIA in particular is doing to every aspect. COVID has demonstrated, we got to be able to work outside of the building, not just, when we're overseas, but here in the United States as well. And using the high technology is a part of that. How we operate overseas, where they've got countries like China with ubiquitous state surveillance, and how we counter that. There's so many, I think, changes that have occurred over the past decade or so that Michael will need to immerse himself in. He's done it in the private sector. He needs to bring that knowledge from the private sector that he's gained into CIA, and bring the right people. It's always about the right people in the right jobs. And I think that's another thing Michael will be focused on, is making sure he's got the right people in the right jobs. There'll be some people who are no longer going to be in the jobs they're in, and some new people who are brought in.
I think that's great advice. Before I let you go, I've got one more minute with you. I'm going to go back to your formula of 3, Daniel. What would be the 3 most important issues you would tell President-elect Biden, if you could talk with him, or if you were sitting in a room with him and maybe who he is deciding to select for the CIA, what would be the 3 biggest threats, the 3 biggest topics you would think at this point in time could affect us, our national security, and the rest of the world?
So I think the first one with the shortest fuse, it's always terrorism. We got to get that right. It doesn't mean we do it exclusively. Of course we don't. We do a lot of things. But again, that's the one with the shortest fuse. China is, I think one of the things the Trump administration did was build a bilateral consensus for countering China, not unlike what the Reagan administration did countering the Soviet Union in the 1980s. A little bit different, a little bit of a different approach. I'd frankly like to see more soft power where we call out China for their human rights abuses. I don't think we did that enough at the presidential level. I think Secretary Pompeo did it, but I'd like to see the president do it too. But those would be the top two. And then I think the third one, at least right now, is this. It's more of an opportunity and a threat. It's the Middle East. The Biden administration has to understand that the Abraham Accords was an extraordinary diplomatic breakthrough. We need to take advantage of that. We need to build on it. We need to bring Saudi Arabia into the fold, and we need to build that counter-Iran alliance in the Middle East. And it's on its way right now. And the Trump administration took us way, into our opponent's territory, into the red zone. But we need to take it into the end zone. There's more to be done on that one. And I think that's the great opportunity. The Biden administration needs to understand that this new approach worked. The Palestinians don't have command and control over the Gulf states' foreign policy towards Israel, nor should they ever have. And the relationship now, diplomatic relations between Israel and the UAE and Bahrain, that's extraordinary, and it's something to build on. And if we fail to do it, then we could be looking at, far greater challenges. There's 20,000 ISIS guys we're going to have to deal with in Syria and Iraq, and a failure in the Middle East could be a real problem for us.
Wow, that's going to be a lot on this administration's plate, considering, especially since I don't know about that Abraham Accord, if how they play Israel and the rest of the Middle East is going to be, that outcome could change completely. We could see the Abraham Accord fall apart, or if they play their cards right, like you're suggesting, Daniel, we could see something extraordinary happen, and we could carry that legacy that President Trump was able to establish for peace all the way through this next presidency. So thank you so much for being with me. It's always such a pleasure. I just realized I looked up, you said I can talk about hammer and sickle. He was sending me a note and I missed it. We were talking about this with Jen Psaki's hat. So
right. Classic move by the Russians. If I'd been with her carrying her bags or something, I would have said, whoa, hey, let me grab that for you. This was the Russians setting her up for a photo op. Wear the hammer and sickle hat because they know it's going to start something. What she should have done is looked at it and said, oh, that's the hammer and sickle. The Soviet Union collapsed, years and years ago. We have a relationship now with Russia, the successor state, not its communist predecessor. I don't think it would be appropriate for me to wear the hat. Thanks so much. I'll gladly take it, though, as a souvenir of the past. And then offline, if she had wanted to be a little bit tougher, she could have said, yeah, wasn't the Soviet Union responsible for mass famine in Ukraine, and Stalin, didn't he kill 25 million of his own people during the Second World War? So she didn't grasp that, look, the Russians, this is what they do. And that was just a bit of an unsophisticated response. Now, I don't blame her. She's not necessarily a Russia expert, but, beware of gifts. The Russians, free treat, I always say, is in the mousetrap when you're talking to the Russians. They give you a gift, you're going to get slapped down like you're going to
get the hammer and the sickle is what you're going to get. You're going to get the hammer and the sickle. Don't trust when you are traveling. This is a message for everyone in government. You travel to a foreign country and they want to get you drunk. They want to give you a hammer and sickle hat. They send a really nice looking person to give you a tour. Just decline it. Just decline it respectfully and walk away. They're setting you up. Thank you so much, Daniel, for being on the show. Care. Thanks for the story, too. I'm glad we know that now. All right, guys, I just want to thank Daniel Hoffman for, I learned so much every time I talk to him. I know you probably did, too. I'm going to bring him back on and again and again. Remember that. Remember his advice. Do not take gifts from enemy states because they could be setting you up. Well, I'll tell you what's not setting anyone up is something great and something wonderful. It's from Arm & Hammer. And what they want to give you is cat litter, but they want to do it for their perfectly imperfect campaign. They're not setting you up for anything. This past month, they were doing it for helping lovable and overlooked shelter cats find forever homes. This campaign makes me think of my own cat, Barry. You guys know how much I love Barry, and I talk about him all the time. We appreciate Arm & Hammer's support, not only for our podcast, but for their love and devotion to cats and cat lovers everywhere. Barry sends you their love, his love, and Arm & Hammer is a perfect sponsor. Thank you again for everything you do for the Sara Carter Show. So don't forget Arm & Hammer X cat litter next time you go shopping. Guys, I want to close out with something I think is very important, something that I want you to hear really quick. You know, I always go back to my interest in science and space. I've had Luis Elizondo on. I've had Nick Pope on, who was the former Ministry of Defense, from Great Britain, talk about the issues of like really interesting issues of like unidentified aerial phenomena or UFOs. Well, guess what? Elon Musk is sending a crew to Mars. Maybe 2024, 2026. I was actually going to ask Daniel Hoffman this until I saw his hammer and sickle note to me. So I want to play you a really quick clip before I let you go and think about our future and think about what this means to the world. I just want to take us away from politics. I want us to think bigger, right? To think about the future of humanity and how awesome it'll be. Listen to this.
I feel fairly confident about 6 years from now. So the Mars, Earth-Mars synchronization occurs roughly every 26 months. So we had one this year, this summer, and so that means in roughly like about 2 years there'll be another one, and then 2 years after that. So I'd say if you say 6 years from now, I think highly confident. If we get lucky, maybe 4 years, and then we want to try to send an uncrewed vehicle there in 2 years.
That's so incredible. An uncrewed vehicle in 2 years and a crew actually heading to Mars in, 4 or 6 years. That's absolutely incredible. He's a dreamer. This is part of the American dream, right? We are going to reach heights we have never imagined. I wish I could be on that crew. They won't want me there. I have no scientific knowledge whatsoever, but I could report on it or do a podcast live from Mars. But since I'm not there now, it's live from Radio America. Thank you so much for being with me today. You are so wonderful. I am so happy that you are a part of my life. Remember, here at the Sara Carter Show, we are taking the story back. And folks, follow me on Parler. That's at Sara Carter Official on Parler, at Sara Carter Official, or on Twitter where they try to censor me and shadow ban me. You can follow me there at Sara Carter DC. Thank you so much. God bless, and see you soon.
Hi, it's Dana Lash, host of The Dana Show. Every day, I'm here to keep you up to speed on the most important stories and info that you need to know in your very busy life. And if you're always on the go and you want to stay connected, just download our daily podcast and take it with you. It's a great way to get up to speed on what you need to know and what legacy media may not be telling you. Visit danaradio.com and click on the podcast link or subscribe at iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.